revolving door of the White House keeps spinning with the departure of America's national security advisor. How will his exit impact U.S. foreign policy? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is John Bolton. Donald Trump is a president who pledged to put America first. No more foreign entanglements. Then came John Bolton, a man who, under previous administrations, supported the invasion of Iraq and strikes on North Korea and Libya. Under Trump, he pushed for regime change in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and perhaps most forcefully, Iran. Bolton was apparently at odds with his boss from the start. Insiders say the only thing more surprising than his initial appointment was how long he lasted. His departure brought praise from Iran's president, who says the U.S. has a chance to push warmongers aside. But does Bolton's ouster say more about how Trump views the world or runs his office? And even though the hawk has flown the coop, could Bolton's belligerence come home to roost? Haider Abbasi takes a look.
They say third time's a charm, but it seems John Bolton isn't charming enough. Donald Trump is now looking for his fourth national security advisor after firing Bolton. Or at least that's what the American president says. Bolton insists he resigned. He joins the long list of Trump White House officials who've been sacked or have quit. Bolton made his name as a hardline neoconservative during the George W. Bush years. He pushed for war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and North Korea, and opposed any thawing of relations with Russia.
What I think has to be the real fundamental objective of American policy, which is squeezing North Korea to the point that the regime falters and that China's pressure can make the difference over the long term to achieve the objective.
But this was at odds with President Trump, who's praised the North Korean leader, lobbied for Russia to rejoin the G7, and is trying to limit America's military footprint abroad. It's the war in Afghanistan that seems to have caused Bolton's downfall.
No, actually, in terms of advisors, I took my own advice. I like the idea of meeting. I've met with a lot of bad people and a lot of good people during the course of the last almost 3 years. And I think meeting is a great thing.
Trump had secretly arranged to meet leaders of the Taliban and the Afghan government for peace talks on US soil. Bolton thought this was a step too far, especially as the meeting was to take place during the commemoration of the September 11th attacks. This begs the question, why was Bolton appointed National Security Advisor? Some analysts say he was brought in to stabilize the chaos in the White House, but it seems the only thing Trump and Bolton agreed on was Iran. It wasn't long after he joined that the US withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal. Yet even that's changed. Trump has recently discussed easing sanctions on Iran to facilitate a meeting with President Rouhani at the UN General Assembly this month. With Trump seeking re-election next year, it seems he's trying to close a big foreign policy deal. Bolton was blocking the president's photo op diplomacy. So, can anyone actually work with Trump? Or will he surround himself with yes men? And what does this mean for US foreign policy? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Okay, to discuss this, let's go straight to Washington, where we're joined by John Feehery. He was the press secretary to the former Speaker of the US House of Representatives. James Carafano is a national security and foreign policy expert with the Heritage Foundation. And Scott Huffman is a Democratic candidate for the U.S. Congress from North Carolina. Good to have you all on the program. John Feehery, I'm not going to get into the whole I broke up with him, no, I broke up with him thing. He's gone. Was it the right move for Bolton to be ousted?
You know, John Bolton served a valuable purpose in the Trump administration. He was the bad cop to Donald Trump's good cop. Bolton didn't want to talk to anybody. Trump wants to talk to everybody. Obviously, Bolton's much of a hardliner, and strikes fear in the hearts of dictators the world over. Trump is a deal maker. And I think that ultimately those paths were never going to stay. They were never going to stay on the same path. And ultimately, Bolton was not kind of outlived his usefulness, especially as Trump was trying to cut these deals the globe over with people that we really traditionally don't like to cut deals with. So I think that he served his valuable purpose for the year and a half he was there. But now it's time for a change. And I think that ultimately Donald Trump is his own national security advisor.
Right. James Carafano, there was a piece in Vanity Fair where the writer said that, well, if it was a case of good cop, bad cop, the problem with Bolton is that bad cop's supposed to play that role in order to achieve the same ends as good cop, but Bolton was just a bad cop rather than bad cop. Do you agree with that?
No, I actually think the assessment is right that Bolton served well for that phase of the presidency, much in the way I thought General McMaster served well in his phase. I was on the presidential transition team, and we really didn't know how to put the president's, or didn't have a way to put the president's words into a plan that people could understand. And I thought HR and Nadia Shadlow, the Deputy National Security Advisor, did a tremendous job putting Trump into a blueprint that we could all see. And I thought Secretary Mattis did a great job going around the world explaining what was going to be different and what wasn't. And that phase worked great. And that phase ended when the president was very comfortable that he understood the big issues. He understood that everybody needed a plan, and they had that, and he wanted to move out and execute. And he brought Pompeo and Bolton in really to do that. And Trump's strategy has always been to stiff arm on one hand to show people he's willing to protect his interests, but then offer diplomacy on the other. And a big part of that was putting that stiff arm on, and that's where Bolton was incredibly helpful. And I think the U.S. set that agenda with the North Koreans, with the Chinese, with the Iranians, and even with the Russians. And Trump's ready to move on to the next phase. And Bolton was probably not the right guy for that. That's probably a good time to end.
Scott Huffman, this is probably one of the few occasions where you agree with the president and you're in agreement with Fox News, I'd even imagine. Was Bolton bad in his role, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, John Bolton was always a war hawk. He has demonstrated time and time again that you should swing a big stick instead of acting with diplomacy. So is his firing a surprise? No. Is his firing a surprise to me? Well, yes. President Trump has demonstrated time and time again that he cannot hold his house in order. He is not a deal maker. If he was such a wonderful deal maker, we wouldn't have tariffs with China. He wouldn't have walked away from a good deal that was with Iran, and they're not producing nuclear weapons. And so, again, we have chaos in the United States, and the world is looking to us to be a world leader. And President Trump has effectively demonstrated that he's not a world leader.
Let's try and look at this from Bolton's perspective for a second here. So he's against talking to the Taliban. He's against inviting them to Camp David. He's vindicated when the Taliban continues attacking U.S. and Afghan interests in Afghanistan. He was against a thaw with the Iranians. The Iranians haven't extended the olive branch at all. So wasn't Bolton a bit hard done by because he had a purpose and a role and he was fulfilling it?
The role that John Bolton wanted to fulfill was to be a war hawk. Okay, let's just lay that up there on the table. That's what been his main role ever since he's been working in Washington. However, President Trump inviting the Taliban to Camp David without a deal in hand was a bad idea. And I think, John Bolton was actually the adult in the room, saying you don't bring terrorists to Camp David to work out a deal. And I believe he also left out the Afghan government in this part of the negotiation of working out a deal.
Okay. So, John Feehery, Bolton wanted Maduro out, he wanted Rouhani out, he wanted Khamenei out. They all outlasted him. He's out. As things stand, should we be thinking about a shift in U.S. foreign policy now, or in the Trump administration having a different kind of pivot now as we move forward into 2020?
Well, listen, I think most Americans still want Maduro out. I think that they would like to see some sort of regime change in Iran, although that's unlikely. I think that they would like to see some sort of accommodation to get us out of Afghanistan, which is something you keep working on. I think we'd like to have a better partner and a better deal with the Chinese. And I think ultimately, we do want to have a relationship with the North Koreans where they're not firing weapons and threatening the Japanese and the South Koreans. I don't think that our main objectives from a foreign policy perspective changed. I do think that the president, though, understands where the American people are. Mm-hmm. And the American people really don't want to get into any more wars. I think we're kind of war weary. We've been in Afghanistan now for 18 years and no end in sight. And I think that ultimately, the American people are looking for some peace deals if possible. But looking back at Venezuela and Maduro, I mean, that guy's a disaster. And, we've got to figure out a different strategy to get him out of there because he's not working.
Okay, so James, help me understand what the president's thinking right now. Because if we can all agree that Trump uses a lot of these appointments instrumentally, right? Once you're past your sell-by date, you're gone. We saw something similar with Steve Bannon even, right? He used him for votes. You had a lot of what they call incels who still live with their moms, people who voted for Trump because Steve Bannon was on board. And then once Charlottesville happened and once there was an association with white nationalism and that kind of racial supremacism, Trump distanced himself completely from someone like Steve Bannon. He didn't need to be associated with any of that anymore. So if we say that Trump needed to be associated with Bolton and his hawkishness for a period of time, now what is Trump trying to be associated with? Does he want to have some sort of deal with the Iranians?
Right. So you bring up, I think, really important points, and which kind of get missed in this is Bolton's coming and going really doesn't change the trajectory of foreign policy. It was Trump's foreign policy. It is, and it will be. Remember, we used to talk about the axis of adults. There's Secretary of Defense Mattis and Secretary of State Tillerson and Kelly as Chief of Staff and H.R. McMaster, and they were restraining the president, and they all left. And our foreign policy was exactly the same. So the general trajectory of U.S. policy has been Trump's from the beginning. On the one hand, he leans forward and demonstrates the willingness to protect his interests. But at the same time, he always puts the diplomatic off-ramp on the table. Like, if you don't want to fight with me, if you're willing to protect my interests, we can do a deal. And he's been consistent in that with all the major competitions, the Taliban, North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. And that's why Trump has no problem with talking without preconditions. He goes, when you're ready to talk, come and talk. I think where people get this wrong is, one, they think that Trump just wants a deal, any deal. This is where I disagree with it. He's not a good deal maker. Anybody can make a deal. I think the Iran deal was terrible. The Iran deal is easy if the other guy gets everything they want.
So does he want
Trump
to make
wants a good deal?
He wants a new deal now, and is this the clearest indication that he's willing to sit across the table from the Iranians and do that deal?
Right, he is. And look, we all recognize politics. I am sure the President of the United States would love to do a deal before the election so he can claim, boom, I've done a deal. But the other thing is he has a reputation as a deal maker, and he also has American interests to look after. So he'd like to do a deal, but he's not going to do a bad deal.
Scott Huffman, James is saying that Trump's foreign policy has been exactly the same no matter who was his national security advisor or no matter who he surrounded himself with. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that because there are several examples. He has created a chaos by walking away from the Iranian nuclear deal. It was a fantastic deal. It was working. Iran was complying with the agreement. And what he did was he created a rift between us and our allies. And our allies are trying to hold on to that deal. And now what has happened? The Iranians have now said they're going to spin up more centrifuges. And then Trump starts to complain about it. Well, he can't complain about it because he broke the deal. He broke the deal from the previous president. And it's pretty clear why he broke that deal.
Okay, but then updating that, certainly, but Scott, updating the news then, the Iranians are welcoming the firing, if he was fired, I don't know for sure, but they're welcoming Bolton being kicked out. So they're saying, yeah, we hope you guys don't choose warmongers anymore. It seems as if the Iranians are willing to do business. They're not necessarily mocking Trump. They're saying, oh, this is good. We didn't like that guy. Good that you got rid of him.
Well, sure. I'm sure any country like that, as far as even North Korea applauded the firing of Bolton, I'm sure, and President Trump will receive a love letter over it. However, North Korea is still shooting missiles. They never did that under the Obama administration.
John Feehery, can we still describe this? Okay, hold on. Let me get James to respond, because you had a little bit of a disagreement there when you mentioned North Korea.
I'd just like to point out a couple of factual errors. One is the North Koreans did do missile tests under the Obama administration. And the other is on the Afghan deal. The administration actually also invited the Afghans to Camp David. He wanted them to talk together. So it was about bringing them together, much in the way Carter brought together the Israelis and the Palestinians. And also the U.S. had been deeply engaged with the Afghans in the progress of the peace talks for several months. So those are just factual mistakes. That's all.
Okay, I'm going to put that aside for a second. John Feehery, let me come to you. And I know you've been quite a trooper. You've been struggling with that earpiece for a few minutes now. And
yeah,
I apologize for that. So John, can we, if we had to describe the president's foreign policy, given all these appointments and dismissals and so on, from the Mattises to the Boltons and so on, can we still say that this is a president with the same foreign policy that he ran on, which was, I want to get America out of all these conflicts. I want to be more isolationist, to use the technical term. I want to focus on America first, and I don't want to wade into stuff that's none of my business. Can we still say that that is the policy?
I think that the president's been amazingly consistent with his foreign policy. Yes, it's America first. Yes, it's trying to get us out of conflicts, trying not to get us into more conflicts, trying to make sure that people understand that we do have a very strong military and we will use it when we need to. But the president also has been very consistent in saying that he will talk to anybody. Now, let me say something about the Iranians. We've put the Iranian deal initially was a terrible deal, and we have put maximum pressure on the Iranians and their economy. And I do think that they are going to have to. They're going to come to negotiate with us for a different deal and a better deal for us, and where they will not be able to fund terrorists attacking Israel, which with Obama administration did. The Iranian, it's important to deal with Iran in the proper way, and we put maximum pressure on them through all kinds of economic means, through sanctions, and it's been actually a really brilliant strategy from the Trump administration.
And as we look forward, Scott Huffman, as we mentioned earlier on the Iranians saying we hope there's no warmongers next time around, Trump's not going to listen to them in terms of who's the next national security advisor. However, can we expect somebody who is more dovish as we look forward, especially if we factor in that he might be doing this ahead of the election to be seen as a deal maker and a peacemaker? Can we expect a more dovish national security advisor?
Well, I don't have any insights to who President Trump is going to choose as this next security advisor. However, this will be his fifth person that will possibly come into that seat. I've heard where he's talking to McMaster's, I believe, who was the former NSA that he had issues with, that might come back into that role. I don't know if he's going to be dovish. I think he's just going to continue to be more chaotic.
James Carafano, what can we expect? Whom can we expect?
Well, there's a lot of names out there. Look, I don't think dove and hawkish is the right metric. John and Trump were friends long before he came to the administration, and Trump knew exactly what Bolton's foreign policy was, and he knew it wasn't his, and he hired him anyway. So I don't think that's the metric that he's looking for. He wants somebody that brings honest advice. He doesn't want yes men, but he wants somebody that's going to work as part of a team and deliver. And so I think that's what they're looking for. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so John Feehery, what's needed right now after Bolton?
Well, I think you need someone that actually largely agrees with the president's strategy, that can play well with others, especially Mike Pompeo, who's the Secretary of State, and to what James said, can actually do the job effectively and, brief the president in ways that the president can take in the information and not be annoyed by this national security advisor. He also has to be someone who's not looking out for the media and not looking to get himself in the press.
Right.
You know, what the president likes to be, he likes to be the center of attention. He doesn't want an NSA person who's going to be out there talking to the media unless he's on TV saying that the president is great. So it's going to be someone who is going to be able to do a good job, and I don't think he's going to be a hawk or a dove. I think it's someone who's going to be able to advance the president's interests and work well with Mike Pompeo and others within the administration.
Right. James Carafano, as if Bolton's views were not hawkish enough if you took them in their full proper context. I remember the president seemingly deliberately misconstruing what Bolton was saying about the Libya model when it came to North Korea, right? So Bolton was talking about denuclearization of North Korea, and he said we can go for the Libya model, which was a process in the 90s when Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons, right? But Trump, when the time was right, went out and said, this is crazy, you know, Gaddafi was killed and Libya went into civil war and it's a disaster, making it seem as if Bolton was talking about an intervention in Libya. So with that in mind, whoever follows Bolton, can they expect to be glorified by Trump, talked up in a big way by Trump, and when the time is right, when they're expendable, to be thrown under the bus?
Well, you know, we've seen a lot of officials. First of all, I think 17 months was a damn good run for John Bolton and for the country. And I think what we don't even discussed is I think he actually helped move the president's agenda a lot during his tenure. But we've seen people working with him really well, Lighthizer, Pompeo. So there are people that have broken the code. So there are some things that obviously Trump likes. He likes somebody that can go on TV and speak and be effective. It's part of the reason why I went to John. But their purpose is really to support the president's agenda. That's important. He doesn't want somebody that's going to leak and go around and make disruptions. He wants somebody that's going to make the process work and deliver results. He wants somebody that achieve results, and he doesn't need a yes man, but you know he doesn't want to be lectured to. And you know somebody that pulls all that together. That's kind of the ideal candidate for Trump.
Scott Huffman, do you trust the president at all to make a good appointment?
No. Plain simply no.
What would you like to see now over the next few months?
You know, the list is long in that area. I would like President Trump to re-embrace our allies instead of embracing dictators. I would like to see him resolve these issues that he's done with Europe. I mean, the list is long, unfortunately, and I feel like we don't have enough time on the show to go over them. However, I really think that Trump should make sure that somebody that he does bring into that role actually is loyal to the country and not loyal to him.
And John Feehery, if we look at Iran as an example, because Iran is front and center when it comes to the Bolton-Trump standoff, which eventually led to Bolton leaving, is it possible for Trump now to have that thaw with the Iranians and to strike some sort of deal with the Iranians?
I think it's possible. I think part of the challenge for the Iranians is that these sanctions are really having a bite, and they need to come to the table. I think that they've been a little bit ridiculous saying that they don't want to talk to the president. Clearly, they're feeling the heat because they had Macron introduce some Iranian leaders in the G7. They do want to talk, but they don't want to talk. I think a deal is possible, but we have to understand that there are a bigger geopolitical situation here. I mean, the Saudis are a very staunch ally. The Israelis and the Saudis have a burgeoning and strong relationship. And so, you know, I think ultimately we have to understand Iran in the context of these two countries and make sure whatever we do does not alienate our allies in the region.
Okay. John, James, and Scott, pleasure having you all on the Newsmakers. I thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Soviet Russia scores a dramatic victory in the exploration of space with the launching of the first rocket to hit the moon. It is the first man-made object to voyage from one cosmic body to another. Russia scores a major scientific advance, dramatically demonstrates the accuracy and reliability of its missiles, and gives Khrushchev a propaganda bonus on the eve of his visit to America.
And that's it for now on the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out full shows and other content on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.